Samurai appeared as a result of the Taika reforms, which started in the land of the rising sun in 646. These reforms can be called the largest socio-political transformation in the history of ancient Japan, which were carried out under the leadership of Prince Naka-no-o. A great impetus to strengthen samuraiism was given by Emperor Kammu in the early 9th century. This emperor sought the help of existing regional clans in a war against the Ainu, another people who lived on the islands of the Japanese archipelago. The Ainu, by the way, are now only a few tens of thousands left. In the XXI centuries, in the process of strife, feudal lords formed influential clans. They had their rather substantial military detachments, the members of which were only nominally in the service of the emperor. In fact, each major feudal lord then needed well-trained warriors professionals. These were the samurai. During this period, the foundations of the unwritten samurai code, the way of the bow and the horse, were formed, which later transformed into a clear set of rules, the way of the warrior, Bushido. The final formation of samurai as a special privileged class occurred, according to most researchers, during the reign of the House of Minamoto in the land of the rising sun. This is the period from 1192 to 1333. Minamoto's succession was preceded by a civil war between feudal clans. The very course of this war set the stage for the emergence of the shogunate, a form of government with a shogun, military leader, at its head. After the Taira clan was defeated, Minamoto no Yoritomo forced the emperor to give him the title of shogun, thus making him the first shogun, and he made the small fishing village of Kamakura his residence. Now the shogun was the most powerful person in the country, a samurai of the highest rank and chief minister at the same time. Of course, the official power in the Japanese state belonged to the emperor. The court also had some influence, but the position of the court and the emperor still could not be called supreme. For example, the emperor was constantly forced to follow the instructions of the shogun, otherwise he would be forced to abdicate. Yoritomo established a new body to govern Japan, called the Field Headquarters. Like the shogun himself, almost all of his ministers were samurai. As a result, the principles of the samurai class spread to all areas of Japanese society. It is believed that the golden age of samuraism was the period from the first shogun to the Omin Civil War, 1467 to 1477. On the one hand, it was a rather peaceful period. On the other hand, the number of samurai was relatively small, which allowed them to have a good income. Then, in the history of Japan, there came a period of many internecine wars in which samurai took an active part. In the middle of the XVI century, it was felt that the empire, shaken by conflicts, will forever break up into separate parts, but the daimyo, prince, from the island of Honshu Oda Nobunaga, managed to start the process of unification of the state. The process was long, and it was not until 1598 that true unity was established. Tokugawa Ieyasu became the ruler of Japan. He chose the city of Edo, present-day Tokyo, as his residence and became the founder of the Tokugawa shogunate, which ruled for more than 250 years. This era is also called the Edo era. With the coming to power of the Tokugawa house, the samurai class increased significantly. Almost every fifth Japanese became a samurai. Since internal feudal wars were a thing of the past, samurai military units were used mainly to suppress peasant uprisings. The highest-ranking and most important samurai were the so-called hatamoto, direct vassals of the shogun. However, the bulk of samurai performed the duties of vassals of the daimyo, and most often they did not have land, but received from their lord some kind of salary. At the same time, they had quite large privileges. For example, Tokugawa legislation allowed a samurai to kill a commoner, who behaved indecently on the spot without any consequences. There is a misconception that all samurai were quite well-off people, but this was not the case. Already during the Tokugawa shogunate, there were poor samurai who lived little better than ordinary peasants, and to feed their families, some of them still had to cultivate the land. When raising future samurai, they tried to instill in them indifference to death, physical pain and fear, the cult of respect for elders and loyalty to their lord. Mentor and family first of all emphasized the formation of the character of the young man who took this path, developed in him courage, endurance, and patience. Character was developed by reading stories about the exploits of heroes who glorified themselves, samurai of the past, watching appropriate theatrical productions. Sometimes the father ordered the future warrior in order to make him braver, to go alone to the cemetery or another bad place. It was practiced for teenagers to visit public executions, and they were also sent to inspect the bodies and heads of dead criminals. and the young man, the future samurai, was obliged to leave a special sign, which would prove that he did not shirk and was really there. Often future samurai were forced to do hard labor, spend sleepless nights, walk barefoot in winter, etc. It is authentically known that samurai were not only fearless but also very educated people. In the Code of Bushido, which has already been mentioned above, it was said that a warrior should improve himself by any means, and so samurai were not strangers to poetry, painting and ikebana, practiced mathematics, calligraphy, held tea ceremonies. Zen Buddhism also had a great influence on the samurai class. It came from China and spread throughout Japan at the end of the XI century. Samurai Zen Buddhism as a religious movement seemed very attractive, as it contributed to the development of self-control, will, and equanimity. In any situation, without unnecessary thoughts and doubts, the samurai had to go straight at the enemy, without looking back or sideways to destroy him. Another interesting fact, according to Bushido, orders of his lord samurai was obliged to fulfill unconditionally. And even if he ordered to commit suicide or go with a detachment of 10 men against an army of thousands, it had to be done. By the way, feudal lords sometimes ordered a samurai to go to certain death, to battle with a superior enemy, just to get rid of him. But do not think that samurai never passed from lord to lord. It happened often in the course of skirmishes between petty feudal lords. The worst thing for a samurai was to lose honor and disgrace in battle. It was said of such men that they were not even worthy of death. Such a warrior wandered around the country and tried to earn money as an ordinary mercenary. Their services were used in Japan, but they were treated with disdain. One of the most shocking things about the samurai is the ritual of harakiri or seppuku. A samurai was supposed to commit suicide if he found himself unable to follow Bushido or was captured by his enemies, and the seppuku ritual was seen as an honorable way to die. Interestingly, the components of this ritual were ceremonial bathing, eating the most favored food, writing the last poem, tanka, and next to the samurai performing the ritual, there was always a faithful comrade, who at a certain moment had to cut off his head to end his torment. How medieval samurai looked like is reliably known from many sources. For many centuries, their appearance almost did not change. Most often samurai went in wide trousers resembling the cut of a skirt with a tuft of hair on the head, called motodori. For this hairstyle, the forehead was shaved bare, and the remaining hair was braided into a knot and fastened at the top of the head. As for weapons, throughout the long history of samurai used different types of weapons. Originally, the main weapon was a thin short sword called a chakudo. Then the samurai switched to curved swords, which eventually transformed into the world-famous katanas. In the Code of Bushido, it was said that the soul of a samurai is contained in his katana. And not surprisingly, this sword was considered the most important attribute of a warrior. As a rule, katanas were used in pair with daisyo, a short copy of the main sword. Daisyo, by the way, had the right to wear only samurai. That is, it was an element of status. In addition to swords, samurai also used bows, because with the development of military affairs, personal bravery, the ability to fight the enemy in close combat became much less important. And when gunpowder appeared in the XVI century, bows gave way to firearms and cannons. For example, flintlock guns called tenegashima were popular in the Edo period. On the battlefield, samurai wore special armor. This armor was lavishly decorated and looked somewhat ridiculous, but at the same time each part of it had its own specific function. The armor was both strong and flexible, which allowed its owner to move freely on the battlefield. The armor was made of metal plates bound together by leather and silk cords. The arms were protected by rectangular-shaped shoulder shields and armored sleeves. Sometimes, no armor sleeve was worn on the right arm to make fighting easier. An integral part of the armor was Kabuto's helmet. Its cup-shaped part was made of metal plates connected by rivets. An interesting feature of this helmet is the presence of an underhelmet, just like Darth Vader from Star Wars. It protected the wearer's neck from possible blows from swords and arrows. In addition to helmets, samurai sometimes wore grim mengu masks to intimidate the enemy. The beginning of the disintegration of the samurai estate is connected with the fact that the daimyo ceased to need large personal detachments of warriors, as it was in the period of feudal fragmentation. As a result, many samurai became ronin, samurai without a lord, or ninja, secret mercenary assassins. And by the middle of the 18th century, the process of extinction of the samurai estate of samurai began to go even faster. The development of manufactures and the strengthening of the position of the bourgeoisie led to the gradual degeneration primarily economic, of the samurai. More and more samurai fell into debt to usurers. Many of the warriors changed their qualifications and became ordinary merchants and farmers. In addition, the samurai became participants and organizers of various schools of martial arts, tea ceremony, engraving, Zen philosophy, fine arts, so expressed the acute attraction of these people to traditional Japanese culture. After the Meiji bourgeois revolution of 1867 to 1868, the samurai, like other feudal estates, were officially abolished, but for some time they retained their privileged position. Those samurai who had actually owned land under Tokugawa, after the agrarian reforms of 1872 to 1873, legally secured their rights to it. In addition, former samurai filled the ranks of officials, officers of the army and navy, etc. And in 1876, Japan issued the famous edict on the prohibition of swords. It explicitly forbade the carrying of traditional cold weapons, and this eventually finished the samurai. Over time, they became just a part of history, and their traditions became an element of the unique Japanese flavor.